Well, welcome to this session, a webinar focusing on Turks and Caicos as a financial centre. Very pleased to welcome David Stewart, who will be giving the main presentation today, but also to welcome you as the audience for this session. You'll know me, I'm Mike Wardle, I'm a director of ZN, and part of the group that organises the FS Club and the webinars, and I'm responsible within ZN for our indices measuring financial sector performance. A brief word of thanks first to our sponsors. The FS Club has sponsors who enable us to conduct this series of webinars and other events. We're very, very grateful to them for their continued support, which allows us to range quite widely across the fields of finance, innovation, technology, and more. Just a brief word on today's programme. Really very simple. My job is to do the introductions and get out of the way so we can hear from David and hear about Turks and Caicos. We'll have some time for questions and answers at the end of David's presentation, and we should wrap the whole thing up by 1:45. In terms of asking questions, for those of you who haven't used GoToWebinar before, on the panel you can see on the screen there's a question box. If you open that up, you can type in a question that will come to us, and just say that we will pass on to David contact details of people who ask questions, just so if there's any follow-up discussion that needs to be had, that can be facilitated. So at any point during the presentation, if you have a question, please put it into the box and we'll come to it towards the end. So that's really all from me, and it's my great pleasure to introduce David, who has been with us before in this webinar series, is Managing Director of the Coriats Trust Company in Turks and Caicos. And David, over to you to talk a bit about developments in the island.
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because there are people from many different time zones on the call today. So I thought I'd just trot through some of the hopefully post-pandemic sort of stats to talk about how the Turks and Caicos Islands has weathered COVID-19 and how we're now identifying strategies for our economy as we exit the pandemic and hopefully see a return to some level of normality. My name, as Mike said, is David Stewart, and I'm a UK qualified lawyer. I work here in the Turks and Caicos as a partner at a law firm called Griffiths & Partners, and also I spend most of my time as managing director of a trust and fiduciary business called Coriats Trust Company that's been in business here for about 44 years and is the largest and oldest trust company in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and we look after a high net worth client base and about $700 million worth of assets. The exciting thing I think about the Turks and Caicos is how well we've negotiated and weathered the COVID pandemic, and how vigorous and energetic our new government is, and how focused they are on growing the financial services sector. And that's really going to be, I think, the focus of what I'm going to talk a bit about today. So if we could have the next slide, please, and the next one. One more, okay. So that's great, thanks. The two picture slides there just show, firstly, Grace Bay Beach, which commonly wins the award for the world's best beach. I think it's won it 7 times out of the last 10 years on the TripAdvisor competition, and it really is a stunning and a huge draw for the Turks and Caicos. Miles and miles of white sand beaches, and those you'll find continue through the cays and small islands that go up from the main island, Providenciales, which is where I am today, and it's really breathtakingly beautiful and still very, very unspoiled and quiet. It's a beautiful place to live, and it's a great place to holiday. So the Turks and Caicos Islands, for those who don't know us, we're a British overseas territory. That means we have the same legislative and constitutional status as, for example, Cayman or BVI. We've got a lot of land, and one of the things that really distinguishes us from other overseas territories. There's a lot of land even on the main island of Providenciales. And we have altogether 30 islands with a population of somewhere around 50 to 60,000 people. The population fluctuates depending on the hotel and tourism industry, and we've seen a lot of people leave the islands during the course of the pandemic as jobs have been furloughed. Those people are now returning to the islands, and we expect the population to grow quickly during the latter part of 21 and the first half of 22. The islands are near to Miami. It's about an hour and 15 minutes, 8 flights a day to Florida, 100 miles southeast of the Bahamas, and 80 miles east of Cuba. The flights to the US have now pretty much resumed, so US, Canada and Europe with British Airways, and we are now climbing back up to our previous situation where we have 90 flights a week, and that's most East Coast destinations in the US, and daily to Toronto, weekly to Montreal. The islands have a stable multi-party democracy overseen by a British governor, and generally regarded as a stable, safe and dependable jurisdiction with a strong commitment to the rule of law. Ultimate Court of Appeal is the Privy Council in London. COVID has hit us. Indicative numbers from the government stats department show a 26.8 decline in GDP, still knocking around the $1 billion level. The prior 2 years we were at $1.25 billion. Initial forecasts that most of that GDP decline will be reversed in 21, and that's almost exclusively down to the resurgence of, in the second half of 21, of our tourism industry. We've had our airport open since July 2020 to travellers who could show a negative COVID test. So we've had a reasonable levels of occupancy last season, and we're looking forward to even better levels this season. But the primary driver has been the sale of high-end villas and the growth in our real estate market generally. So we're looking at a significant change, and to give some figures around that, our 2019 property sales were around $360 million. We're forecasting something in the region of $700 to $750 million for 2021, which of course hasn't finished yet. And that has also knocked on to increase government tax receipts, because stamp duty rates here on sale transactions are 10% if the transaction's over $500,000, which most of those transactions will be. So that's neatly replaced the lost government revenue from 2020 and indicates, I think, that we'll have a strong rebound, as we've seen a dramatic increase in the interest of foreigners buying property here. And of course, there's no restrictions on owning property in the Turks and Caicos. And so that's enabled anyone who wants to come here to buy property. That has led in turn to our expectation that there'll be a surplus in 2021, and the government indeed has not yet drawn, it says intend to draw on the debt facility it set up at the beginning of 21 to as a contingency for the drop in tax revenue. So it looks like we won't draw down on that at all, and that the reduction in tax revenue has been more than compensated for by the increase in real estate sales. We've seen a massive fall in the number of visitors, primarily because we have had no cruise ship visitors, but given that their average check or their average spend is pretty minor, the figure to focus on is the number of visitors who've actually visited and stayed overnight, and that's around 370,000. We would expect that to climb back up in 21, and those are the visitors that are powering the growth of the island. In June this year, our Ritz-Carlton resort launched as a $250 million development with condominiums and hotel rooms, restaurants, casino, and that is a major milestone for the Turks and Caicos, a serious international hotel brand, now operating very successfully here in Providenciales in the Turks and Caicos. If I could have the next slide, please. So the Turks and Caicos, we expect to maintain its BBB+ rating. I've talked a little bit about our airlift. It's really quite a big draw because it enables anyone who is based here or who wants to live here part-time to travel very straightforwardly and very easily and cost-effectively all over North America. American Airlines have two big hubs in the States, in Charlotte and Miami, and we have 4 flights a day, 2 to Miami and 2 to Charlotte on American, as well as flights on JetBlue and Southwest to Fort Lauderdale, and flights to Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, Boston, Philadelphia, New York, etc., multiple times a day, and certainly in the case of New York. The islands are an attractive place to live, and we are seeing increased interest from North Americans and Europeans who would otherwise look perhaps at Cayman or the Bahamas. And the reasons for that, and the connectivity, the excellent schools, healthcare, shops and restaurants in the Turks and Caicos, and the fact that it's safe with very low levels of crime and a strong effective police force, and very good broadband connections. It's certainly possible to get domestic connections that give you 100 megs plus, and you can operate day trading or whatever else you want to do from home. So it's a great infrastructure, and the combination of all of those factors, I think, is driving a lot of interest in the Turks and Caicos. And we're seeing increasing numbers of applications for permanent residency. Residency in the Turks and Caicos is available at the moment in return for the purchase of a property in excess of $1 million on the island of Providenciales, and slightly less on some of the other islands. So that's permanent residency, and as I say, we're seeing a great deal of interest in that. Next slide, please. And so the part of what I've been asked to talk about today by our Premier and Deputy Premier, who's also our Minister of Finance, is the Turks and Caicos Islands government commitment to a diversification of our economy, and in particular, their commitment to grow our financial services sector. So the Turks and Caicos Islands is very heavily dependent on tourism and high-end real estate. It's hard to get precise statistics, but most of our colleagues agree that that's somewhere around 80% of our GDP is directly or indirectly associated with hotels and tourism and real estate. So diversification of our economy is important, and the most viable sector to do that is financial services. So we're looking forward to growing that sector post-pandemic, and in particular attracting investors who want to develop financial services businesses in a tax-neutral environment like the Turks and Caicos. So that photograph is a typical vista from a villa on Parrot Key, a private island, a few minutes boat ride away from where I am now, and generally regarded as one of the most beautiful places on earth to spend a vacation, and the preferred destination for a lot of international celebrities. It is well worth a visit. I recommend it highly. So next slide, back to financial services. The financial services GDP share at around 9% actually probably flatters the international financial services numbers, because that includes domestic financial services such as banking and insurance. We think that in conjunction with our regulator, who is obviously not involved in the promotion financial services, but rather their regulation, but has a commitment to being responsive, user-friendly, predictable and collaborative. And I can assure all those listening that we have an excellent regulatory environment here in the Turks and Caicos, which is supportive of our attempts to grow the industry. The Turks and Caicos has no income inheritance, capital gains, corporation or personal taxes of any kind. It is a tax-neutral jurisdiction, and as such, an appropriate place to aggregate capital for investment in other countries, which is the primary purpose of much of the work that I'm involved with. We have no exchange controls at all. Unlike other British overseas territories and tax-neutral jurisdictions, we are exclusively a US dollar currency. We don't have our own currency. Our regulatory score, if you like, is pretty good. We rank alongside our competitors. We're largely compliant. We have EU whitelisting for economic substance. Legislatively, we've been through quite a lot of legislative change. The core building blocks of an international finance centre are now in place, with a recent trust law and changes to our companies and insolvency law that have been very radical. We've borrowed pretty much all of the BVI statutes as updated by BVI, and that's the direction we chose, and those were enacted and came into force in the course of the last few years. We've got a strong international banking community, Canadian banks, alongside a Swiss bank, Bordier, which is a private bank, and Turks and Caicos Banking Company, and British Caribbean Bank. Accounting firms, Baker Tilly, Grant Thornton and others. We, as a jurisdiction, have a strong and clean reputation, and no Panama or Paradise paper baggage, or even Pandora paper baggage for the Turks and Caicos. And as I say, great added. So overall, the playing field, if you like, is ready for interesting, credible, and compliant financial services businesses to come here. And we're targeting, in particular, trust companies like the one I run, Coriats, fund managers and fund administrators, so setting up funds, creating funds in the Turks and Caicos, and also mid-market captives, insurance managers, and captive insurance formation agents. So trying to increase the number of captive structures that we set up here. And we're very experienced in dealing with captive insurance vehicles and have had a long history of dealing with the US producer-owned reinsurance captives. We have about 14,000 of those in the Turks and Caicos, and we think that we are an ideal environment for those who perhaps are looking for a more cost-effective captive setup solution than is offered by Cayman or Bermuda. So next slide, please. And one more, and then one more. So I'm asking the question, why would you consider investing in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and what are the key advantages of this jurisdiction over others? And I'm going to summarize some of what I've just said, and also talk about, I think, some of the opportunities that we've got here. So first of all, a strong economy. That economy has ridden the crisis that COVID-19 created extraordinarily well, much better, I think, than we expected, partly due to the confluence of increased demand from foreign buyers for Turks and Caicos Islands homes, and increased supply of those homes because there was some spare capacity in the economy, and we were able to construct and deliver those homes to those who wanted them. So with a strong bounce back predicted for 2021, no debt, there's absolutely no borrowing on the part of the Turks and Caicos Islands government at the moment, and a rebound in our GDP numbers, we think that we are one of the strongest regional economies, and will be seen as such when people start taking stock of and counting the score of winners and losers from the COVID-19 pandemic. We have a very pro-business investment climate. We have a strong commitment now from leadership, political leadership, from the civil service and from the private sector. We are able to offer incentives for those applicants who qualify, such as work permits and permanent residency in priority sectors such as financial services. That's an important message, because I think that one of the problems that you can have in other competing jurisdictions is getting the necessary permissions for foreign staff and principals who want permanent residency. As I say, that is on offer now very clearly from our government, and we'd be very happy to talk to anyone who would like to explore those opportunities. We have a strong legal system, BOTC, strong commitment to the rule of law, and our court system is effective and well respected in the region. Effective regulation and compliance, I've already talked about that, but broadly compliant and certainly not regarded as being in any way on any blacklist or in any difficulties. We have great airlift, talked a lot about that. First mover opportunities, I think there is a sense that without the baggage of our peer group and with strong support and commitment from government to develop the sector, the financial services sector in the Turks and Caicos is an attractive option for anyone who wants to set up a business that is perhaps or could be in some way aligned with our international brand as a sort of 5-star tourism destination and as a highly credible and quality place to live. We are very keen to see that sector grow across the board, and would encourage anyone who's interested to contact either myself or our investment agency, Invest TCI, to talk about the opportunities and incentives that we offer. Some of those are temporary and permanent residency status and guaranteed work permits available for management and skilled staff. There's a good labour force, highly educated and experienced, and we also hope to attract back many of the Turks and Caicos Islanders who currently live in the US, Canada and the UK as we grow our financial services sector. Finally, I think one of the attractive parts of our proposition to people who want to invest here is just what a wonderful quality of life employees can be offered if they come to live here. It's still very low traffic, low crime, lots of beautiful beaches, beautiful things to do at the weekend, easy commuting times, and the infrastructure to support a really high quality of life. So that is why we encourage, we believe we have a great proposition to those who want to start up financial services businesses here. And I'm very happy to talk more about that to anyone who might be interested. That really, for me, is all I wanted to say, and I'm very grateful to all of those who dialed in for their time and attention, and I'd be delighted to talk about, to answer any questions that people might have, either here or you can contact me. There's my contact details on that back page. I'd be very happy to have a chat with anyone later on. So thank you very much indeed to Mike Wall and the team at Press Club and for the opportunity to speak to you all. And I hope that I'll see some of those who are on this call here in the Turks and Caicos, or at least speak to you in the near future. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you very much, David. There's a whistle-stop tour around the current prospects in Turks and Caicos, but also some really sound reasons why it's somewhere that people might want to take an interest in and to invest. We're moving into question and answers forum. Do keep your questions coming. Just typing in through the question tab on the dashboard. But I guess for a first question, David, is the various international tax agreement discussions that are going on driven by the international organisations, whether it's G20 or OECD. Will they have an impact on Turks and Caicos, or what's the current thinking in Turks about the impact of international tax agreements?
In short, the answer we think is no. The regrettably, businesses with turnovers of more than $750 million haven't located here so far, and I think looking at the effect it's going to have on most of the tax neutral jurisdictions, I think it's going to be relatively modest. It will certainly have an effect probably on Dublin and possibly on some of the Crown dependencies, but I think for us in the Caribbean tax neutral environment, we don't expect it to have a dramatic effect on the work that we do.
I thought that might be the answer, but I just want to put it out there because whenever I talk to people about offshore centres, they often raise it. I've got a question about connectivity with other parts of the world. Obviously, you're well connected into the US and Canadian markets. Have you ambitions, I guess, as Turks and Caicos to expand your connectivity to other regions of the world? Where do you see natural partnerships that might occur?
Well, I think we see an affinity with Asia. We've certainly seen a lot of interest in the Turks and Caicos from Hong Kong interests, and we would expect that our connectivity with Europe will also improve as basically there's quite a simple algorithm between number of hotel beds and the sort of European lower cost operators flying it. So I would expect to see that increasing as we grow. We've got 2 hotel projects funded and ground broken that will will increase our beds here by another 20 or 30%. But it's really, I think, looking at the Hong Kong and the rest of Asia and trying to build a stronger connection and also a better sales channel to those jurisdictions that is certainly on government's mind and the investment agency's mind as we sit here today. And you'll certainly see more noise and more promotion from the Turks and Caicos in Asian markets.
And just following on from that, a question about how far you're connected into Latin American economies. I mean, Latin America has suffered quite badly, I think, economically in the pandemic. And how far do you see also your reach into Latin America?
We certainly in this business, we've just hired a new director who's focused on Peru and Mexico. Latin Americans generally have a natural reservation about structuring through the United States, although many of them get their advice from Miami-based professionals, and the Turks and Caicos in general, and this business, my business in particular, is currently focused on Latin America to a great extent. That's where we're getting almost all of our new business from. The general message I'm getting from Latin American wealth advisors is a sense of fear and concern at inexperienced new governments taxing in a way that's ineffective but damaging. And that's certainly a worry for Peruvians who've just had their who had a Marxist president who's been elected, although interestingly, that government has yet to impose any new taxes and appears, I think, to be a bit surprised that it was elected. But there's a lot of concern that post-COVID, there's huge shortfalls in public income. There's a massive need for expenditure on health service and to remediate the effects of COVID on the Latin American economies. Their credit ratings are all sinking. It's getting more and more expensive to borrow, and the answer to all of those problems is to increase tax burden. There's really not much choice, and that I think is increasingly driving people to look at how they can preserve their wealth. So yeah, Latin America is a big market for us.
And just a question, I guess, is very much in the news. We just finished COP26, and the whole question of sustainability in terms of finance, but also sustainability in terms of climate risk. And just again, is there a particular take on that from Turks and Caicos, in terms of either developing green finance or sustainability to mitigate risks of climate change?
Well, I'm grateful for that question. Yes, at a practical level, our energy supplier, Fortis, which is a listed Canadian business, held 2 weeks ago a climate change conference with the Premier here and various contributors. And there's a lot of talk and some action around a commitment to going fossil fuel free within a reasonable period of time. So I think that you will see, we've already seen legislative and taxation changes. So customs duty for hybrid vehicles has now been reduced dramatically. It's now 10%, and regular vehicles are somewhere between 40 and 60%. We've seen a commitment from our energy producer to create a carbon neutral energy supply within, I think they said 2030 or 2035.
Mm-hmm.
On the financial services front, the Minister of Finance and the Premier, I'd certainly believe that one of the key areas for growth would be in green tech and environmentally sustainable funds, and that would be a very well-aligned focus for Turks and Caicos to get behind and to associate itself with. We've already seen the Turks and Caicos delivering some quite innovative solutions to our environmental problems. We've had a very successful reef repair program here, and we already have a major wildlife sanctuary for our iguanas. So that is something that I would expect over the course of this year to see much more of, and I'm very optimistic that the global interest in climate change and the need to find good returns that are also socially and politically helpful to the world's problems means that green funds are going to be a growth area, and perhaps even when associated with technology, supplant FANGs as the next big thing. I'm hopeful that will be something that Turks and Caicos will have a role to play in.
And Caroline Kurzweil's asked, do you think that Turks and Caicos might consider following Barbados and Bermuda as a hub for tech digital nomads with a kind of welcoming visa program?
Yeah, we have so legislation to formalise a digital nomad program is being discussed now, and I would expect that we'll launch that legislation during the course of 2022. We do encourage responsible visitors, and we have seen a number of people who have come to the Turks and Caicos to explore digital nomad opportunities. Those people really want a clear piece of legislation which enables them to work from the islands, and we will deliver that to them during the course of 2022.
And of course, having good broadband connectivity on the beach is obviously key to that.
Like you can get 100 megs on the beach, and you can avoid getting sand or anything else in your laptop. I think it's a pretty attractive place to work from.
I was saying that David, before we started, was just saying it's been very good weather in the Caymans, and sitting here in rather a gloomy day in the UK, you can't help but be a little bit jealous of the climate and the excitement of having sunny, clear weather to look forward to.
It is a big part of the attraction of living here, but that allied to, I think, good regulation, good government, and good infrastructure, and a mature and sophisticated engagement with the financial services industry. We want to see a good financial services industry grow here in the Turks and Caicos, and we think we've got the ideal combination of offers to make that happen.
Well, David, thank you very much. I think we've exhausted the questions that have come in from the audience today, but it's been a really good discussion. And as David said, if you have any follow-up questions or just want to get in touch for a chat about potential business opportunities in Turks and Caicos, David's very open to being in contact with.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate it. And thanks to your team.
It just remains me to give a few rounds of thanks. First of all, again, to mention our sponsors who allow us to operate this series of webinars and events. We're very grateful to them for their continued support. Obviously, thanks to you as the audience for coming along today. There will be a recording of the event, and if you want to rewatch or you want to point colleagues or friends to it, that'll be up on the website within a couple of days. And of course, I'll save myself to thank David in just a minute. In terms of other events that are taking place tomorrow, Thursday, and then Wednesday, Thursday next week, we have sessions on the cyber weapons arms race, kind of hot topics in employee share ownership, digital resilience, and markets and supply chains. So a wide-ranging set of events coming up, and do keep an eye on our website for other interesting webinars and events. And we'll start and have started to have some in-person events happening as well. So finally, David, thank you very, very much for your presentation today and for your time. It's been a pleasure, as always. And really wish you well in the Turks and Caicos with the bounce back from COVID, and a continued success in terms of the development of financial services. So thank you very much for your time today.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.